convincing win over Abzan. He's going to play against another one of those 3-color control decks in the form of Danny Jessup's Sultai control deck.
Oh, and he's looking at those tokens that we have off to the side. Those are our new Storm tokens for keeping track of mana. The actual Storm die goes on that one, and then we have various colored mana symbols. We got the inspiration from a player we watched on camera who had
those are excellent.
Such a setup here.
All right, we're underway. Danny's on the play. He is playing Sultai control. He's on the left. Jim Davis is on the right with red-white, a red-white temple. First play, we'll get to see what Jim is on. It is going to be Thoughtseize. And we'll see Davis work on Soulfire, Grandmaster, Seeker of the Way, Wild Slash, and 3 lands. It's safe to assume that Jim knows what his opponent is on in this match.
Yeah, I mean, they flew out here together. I'm sure they're intimately familiar with each other's lists. They might be able to recite each other's 75. This is the type of hand that Sultai Control really preys upon. You see a Thoughtseize here. There's a Wild Slash in Jim's hand. That does very little. There's 2 creatures here. You can Thoughtseize one of them. Ideally, you find a removal spell for the second one, and then you're playing Draw Step to Draw Step with way more power in your deck than Jim has.
Yeah, so he goes ahead and takes the Seeker of the Way, leaving Jim with the Soulfire Grandmaster. Danny then plays a second land. Jim's draw Valorous Stance. It's not a terrible card here, but to get value out of it, he'd really have to play, I think, his threats more slowly than he can reasonably do.
I don't think he can wait until the 4th turn of the game to play the Soulfire Grandmaster, and if he doesn't play it on turn 2, he's letting the cat out of the bag as to what's going on. So I think Jim's forced to cast it here, even though it's possible that this Valorous Stance just gets stranded in his hand.
Yep, so it's played past Jim. Dan goes ahead and cracks Fetch Land, now with all 3 of his colors online, so he finds blue mana. Main fix just perhaps he has something like Sultai Charm now, just trading removal. And it's going to be Ashiok Nightmare Weaver. And not that much power on Jim's side of the board. This Ashiok could go uncontested.
Well, he knows that Jim has a Wild Slash and the Soulfire Grandmaster, so the way that Jim's hand was last turn, he cannot get Ashiok off the table.
Yep, finds 2 Mantis Riders off the first mill there. Which means that if Jim wants to keep Ashiok off of Mantis Rider, he may just have to Wild Slash to Ashiok this turn. You actually see Jim with a draw of another Wild Slash. He could conceivably kill the Ashiok this turn, but...
And I don't know what else he's doing with those Wild Slashes as part of the problem here.
Yeah, I guess eventually he could hope to buy some of them back with Soulfire Grandmaster.
That's quite a ways down the pipeline, yeah. I think that, next, if you just Wild Slash once here and attack with Soulfire Grandmaster, your Soulfire Grandmaster is just checked for the rest of the game. It's dealing 2 points of damage to Ashiok while Ashiok keeps on plussing for 2. So I think Jim just has to do this.
Yep, Jim double Wild Slashes and attacks the Ashiok down. So still the 2-for-1 that Danny's probably pretty happy with that outcome.
Yeah, it's a slightly aggravating from Danny's side of the table because Jim was able to do something productive with Wild Slashes, which generally do nothing in the matchup. But again, just running Jim out of total resources to work with.
You see the draw from Jessup is Bioblight. His hand looks to be 2 Garruk Apex Predators, a Bioblight, and a Dig Through Time.
The Bioblight's a perfect draw here because Danny's hand was awfully slow here. I mean, he was no answer in sight to the Soulfire Grandmaster, and not even the ability to cast Dig Through Time. So Bioblight's a huge draw.
Back over on Jim's side. We know he has Valorous Stance in hand, but not much else. One more land as well. Draw was a red card. He'll swing in with Soulfire Grandmaster.
And such discipline here from Jim, sensing that Danny has some removal spell in his hand, not willing to cast the Route Master before combat.
And it's going to be Bioblight for the Grandmaster. Valor Stance won't do anything there. Go back over to Jim's side, and looks like he's going to go ahead and wait until he has 5 mana before deploying that Rabble Master.
Yep.
5th land from Jessup.
Though, if he doesn't find land number 5 here, he still might just cast it, because
it's too much tempo to not do it.
I think so.
And we'll see, he did hit land 5, but it's a temple, so he can't actually play Rabble Master protected yet. You see, if he doesn't, there's a lot of penalty. Dan will just get to, for free, fire off this Dig Through Time.
Exactly.
I mean, you don't want to go that late against Sultai. Scry for Jim is to the bottom. And no, he is all in on this Rabble Master. He's going to cast that. And Patience on Jessup's side as well. He doesn't even go for the Dig Through Time.
No, he does not have double blue right now is the problem.
You're absolutely right.
He's got only 1 blue source of mana.
He drew Hero's Downfall, so Jim being rewarded for the patient play here.
Yeah, this is a great sequence from Jim. I would not have had this sort of discipline myself in the same spot, but now it's working out pretty nicely for him.
Jim sequencing his lands here. Yeah, trying to not take damage for Valorous Stance. Plays Goblin Rabble Master, is going to go to attacks. Here's Hero's Downfall. There's Valorous Stance. It'll keep the Rabble Master alive, and this could be enough. We will see.
Yeah, just great patience here from Jim.
Jessup needs a kill spell or an island or 2 lands. And the draw was Disdainful Stroke. That is not going to be any help.
Worst draw on the deck.
Yeah. Now the question is, I wonder if Jim plays the second Rabble Master here. If you sense weakness, the second Rabble Master makes it lethal the next turn.
Well, if you had to imagine that Danny would have used Crux of Fate last turn if he had it. You know, he's not waiting again, I don't feel like.
Right. So if you just so yeah, we'll see. Because if Jim does jam Rabble Master, then this swing is going to be for 3, 6, 8, and then the next swing will be for everything else.
Yeah.
But it does open the door to things like Crux of Fate, Bioblade, and Jim's going to take the risk. Here's Goblin Rabble Master, goes to combat. Jessup has nothing. Here's 2 more Goblins to swing. 3 from the Goblins, 5 from the Rabble Master. Jessup is at 8 and in need of a sweeper.
And at this stage, even Dig Through Time is probably going to mean that it's his whole turn or close to it.
Well, if he can dig through time into a Bioblade, he's got a shot.
Yeah.
And here's Yavimaya Coast. It's going to be his turn. I think it's his only line, is to look for a Bioblade here. With 5 cards in the graveyard, he's going to have to pay 3 for the dig through time.
Means like Crux of Fate is off the table. Something like Kiora or Ashiok doesn't play here.
He doesn't play Drown in Sorrow in the main.
Yeah.
So I think it's Bioblade or bust. And going to take a spin. It is dig through time. Dan Jessup down to 7. And even then, he'll have to deal with those goblins, but at least he'll have a shot.
Yep. I mean, he'll fall to 4 at the minimum.
Does he find Bioblade? That's the question.
Nope.
Nope. All right, on to game 2. Jim Davis up 1-0.
It's been a funny set of matches we've had Jim on camera for. You know, he had that mulligan to 5 against Obzon in game 1, and over here, it looked like he was getting beat up pretty bad as well.
Yeah,
but able to pull it out.
2 drops and Wild Slashes did not look promising against Sultai.
And just an incredible display of patience from Jim there that first game. I think that if I was in Jim's seat, I probably would have lost game 1.
If you run out the unprotected Rabble Master,
it would just died.
It would die.
There wouldn't have been enough left over, and the Valor Stance would have done nothing.
What I like about what Jim did is I think Dan Jessup wasn't showing a lot of game there, and so he had to picture what cards does Jessup have in his hand, and I really feel like he figured it out.
Yep. Probably some big stuff and maybe 1 removal spell, which is exactly what Danny's hand was.
All right, players are getting ready to sideboard. Before that, we're going to talk a bit about Star City Game Night. So you always see the pins that we've been doing this for about 6 months, and those are related to Star City Game Night. So what is Game Night? It's something that we run here at Star City, and you can run at your store near you. You see, any store can make one of their tournaments during the week of Star City Game Night. Just have to contact us at starcitygames.com. And what does that mean? It means whatever tournament format you run, the prizes will come from Star City Games, exclusive artists producing tokens and pins as prizes for the players. You see, for March, those prizes were these rat tokens. You see them on our that we are wearing them on our suits as well. The little pin on the left and those tokens. And it's too late to get in for March, but you can get in for April. And let me tell you, April, this is just great. We'll go over. Still like it. Still great.
Look at him.
It's got such big eyes.
Yeah, they're just so adorable. And that hamster you think might be upset, but it's not. It's also having a blast in that ball.
Yeah, he doesn't know.
Doesn't know any better. It's just a hamster. It doesn't really know what's going on. Anyhow, if you want to sign up for April, we're about hitting the deadline here, so you got to move fast. StarCityGames.com/game night for more information, or contact your Star City Games organized play representative.
Yeah. I'm gonna try to get those ones. They're just too cute.
Oh yeah,
too cute.
We get the pins when we do the show. Our producers are really on the ball of making sure that the pins get back to them because we need them for future shows. I'm saying it right now. I'm stealing the kitten token. That one's coming back with me. So, Star City Games, whatever you allocate for the coverage staff, just make one more because one of them is getting stolen. You can't watch me forever. I am one slippery dude when I want to be, and I am definitely stealing one of those pins. That's a no-brainer.
All right, sideboard. Let's look at Danny Jessup's sideboard here. So, we did see things like Disdainful Stroke, not doing that much. Sometimes we see the control decks, like Blue-Black, keeping Disdainful Strokes against Jeskai decks so that they have answers to things like Outpost Siege. But when Danny has things like Sultai Charm, he can afford to be lower with his curve.
Yeah, he's got good answers to Jim going big because Sultai Charm, well, that's a very good answer to Stormbreath Dragon and to Outpost Siege. And Sarkin can be answered in a variety of ways. So I don't think he's necessarily going to have to keep in the Disdainful Strokes. He may want a few, but I don't think he needs to keep all of them. He's got 3 copies of Courser Crew Fix, 2 Drown Sorrow, 2 Freakish Cure, 2 Negate, 2 copies of Tassiker, a Disdainful Stroke, an Aether Spouts, a Pearl Lake Ancient, and a Cure of the Crashing Waves. I really like the 2 copies of Tassiker, the 2 Negates. I think Farika's Cure is awesome here, Drown in Sorrow, and Courser Crew Fix. Dan's got a lot of different options here.
In a lot of ways, it seems like he's becoming more of an Abzan-style deck where it's just kill spells, Coursers, and Tassiker.
Yes, that's about right. I think that he wants both Freakish Cure and Drown Sorrow. Jim's got a lot of 2 types of creatures. He's also kind of got this aggressive burn strategy going, so Freakish Cure and Drown Sorrow I think are both powerful options.
Yeah, in this matchup on the Sultai side, it doesn't, now correct me if I'm wrong here, it doesn't seem like the blue cards are particularly effective against the Jeskai deck.
Not really. It is nice to have things like Dig Through Time and Treasure Cruise as ways to break the game open after you've stabilized, but no, I don't think the counters are particularly good here, though I think Negate's fine. Given that Jim's the aggro build and not the token build, though, he has no copies of Jeskai Sensei, Negate might not come in.
Yeah, looking at Jim Davis's side, we did see Valorous Stance be pretty good. He has another one of those in his sideboard. Other cards, Anger of the Gods, Disdainful Strokes of his own, Glare of Heresy, Erase. But things I expect him to go to, things like Negate, Treasure Cruise, and Ash Cloud Phoenix all seem pretty well positioned.
Disdainful Stroke as well. I think all the counters are great here. I think his durable threats are very powerful as well. And Jim's got a lot of cards to cut, which is nice too. He's got Wild Slashes. Even something like Stoke the Flames is pretty poor against Jessup. So Jim gets to really improve his deck here.
Yeah, now, when you start cutting the burn spells, do you have to start looking at Soulfire Grandmaster at some point?
I think that Jim still wants a 2/2 for 2 in this matchup, just something to start attacking with. You are right that it goes down in value, but keep in mind that Jim's bringing in counter spells as well. So it's possible you get to spots where you have 6 mana, Soulfire Grandmaster, and either Negate and or Disdainful Stroke, and it's very hard for Jessup to do anything in that kind of spot.
We are underway game 2. Both players on 7 again. Remember, this is 5-0. Players playing for 6-0 here. Jim Davis up a game. They're going to trade Temples once again at the beginning. We see Jim with some 2-drops in his hand. Does have Outpost Siege, Soulfire Grandmaster, and Seeker of the Way, but it'll be Dan this time with the first creature. That's going to be Satyr Wayfinder. Mills Bioblight, Sultai Charm, Drown in Sorrow, but no land, so... And Hero's Downfall, yeah, 4 kill spells milled.
Somehow, it definitely matters, but it feels like it doesn't matter because just putting 4 cards in the graveyard is so potent for this deck.
Yeah,
now,
when he misses a land, you don't feel that bad about it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously he would want to have the land if he could, but...
Satyr Wayfinder, Silumgar, Crux of Fate, and, well, finally he hits a land. It was almost the second one he might have cared about.
Yeah, missing the second time's really bad. Missing the first time, usually you can push through.
The second one, and he'll pass back to Jim. And Satyr Wayfinder is such a good card in these Sultai control decks, just really as a way to buy time, it seems.
It does everything. I mean, it's a ton of mana, in essence, for things like Murderous Cut and Tassiger, Dig Through Time. It's the card that allows you to play so many Delve cards, and that's really the big evolution of the deck that Gerard introduced was most of these decks were playing just Dig Through Time or just Treasure Cruise, and Gerard said, well, forget that, I can play all of it, and Satyr Wayfinder is the reason you're able to play all of it.
Now back over to Jim. Options of 3-drops here. He does have Rabble Master. Yeah, it'll just be a turn 3 Rabble Master. By playing it means he knows he can't really swing Seeker unless he wants to trade it with Wayfinders.
Well, I think that it's fine to attack here with the Seeker because...
Opens the way for Rabble Master, then?
Exactly. And, you're playing against a deck that has, sweepers in it, so getting in a point of damage this turn is pretty valuable.
Yeah, he's just going to swing the Goblin. I do understand, though, yeah, Seeker's not really the all-star card in this match. You can just trade him for things.
Yep.
Then again, this traded a Goblin token for Satyr. Jim's got to be okay with that outcome.
It's one of those spots where it's kind of marginal for Jim one way or the other. It's a borderline call. Jim elected not to attack. I think in his spot, I probably would have sent in the Seeker, but it's very close either way.
Yeah. Course of Crufix for Jessup does net him a land more wastes off the top of the deck. Free card, goes back up to 20, and shows a pretty good card on top. It's going to be Farika's Cure as the next draw for Jessup.
That's a very, very nice one.
Without the Farika's Cure, Jessup runs the risk that Jim would, say, have a Valorous Stance here or Soak the Flames for the Courser, and then just start swinging the team for a lot of damage. But Farika's Cure gives him insurance.
Yep. That's the one of the issues with the Sultai control deck. It can be a little fidgety and cumbersome out of the gates if it doesn't have something like Murderous Cut to catch up from the early tempo losses.
Fourth land from Jim. He'll go ahead and make a goblin and look to swing here. A lot of pain lands from Jim. Looks like he's going to swing, and then it will be Stoke the Flames on Courser. So this turn's going to be a lot of damage. Next turn, we know about the Freaka's Cure and Negate, I suppose, and that Danny will have.
Yep.
Dig Through Time in his hands, very strong here.
He's got some really good turns set up here. He's got 4 mana and a lot of productive things to do for 2 mana. So he gets to do 2 pretty sweet things.
Right now, Danny will make the trade, take the full amount of damage. That's 6 damage. He'll go to 14. Jim gaining 3 up to 22. And I think we're just confirming life totals here. A lot of pain land going on. We'll confirm in a second here.
Yep.
But looking at Jessup's hand, yeah, he has a Negate, he has a Dig Through Time. Looks like it's at least 1 more land.
Still no big payoff card. I don't know if he can, you see Garrick in his hand, but he's a little ways away from being able to deploy that.
Yeah, I mean, how much does he need that big payoff in this matchup? I guess he doesn't have Siege Rhinos or anything just to gain life for him.
Yeah, he doesn't have... The issue with this Sultai deck is you see Abzan that goes really big, goes up to things like Ugin, but they have some powerful things like Siege Rhino and sometimes Waymate Rock to get them to the finish line. They don't necessarily have to go big to win every game. The Sultai deck kind of does have to go big to win every single game. There's nothing in the middle that's capable of threatening lethal. And because of that, Disdainful Stroke and Negate is very potent against them post-board.
Yeah, all right, well, life total confusion was resolved. Dan Jessup at 14, Jim Davis at 22. We go back to Dan's turn.
And Danny with quite a few pain lands as well here, which is a lot worse for him than it is for Jim.
Oh, yeah. Especially when you're trying to cast cards like Farika's Cure. They lose a lot of value. So Jessup is going to start with Dig Through Time.
And I think this is a Dig Through Time on the search for Drown in Sorrow, at which point Jessup can just play a land. He has a Polluted Delta already ready to go, Drown in Sorrow, and keep the Freakish Cure for something else.
Yeah. He might even take an Urborg if he finds one, just to gain him a lot of life.
Yep.
But if he doesn't find the Drown in Sorrow, the Freakish Cure is definitely getting cast on Rabble Master.
Right, so this play right here, the Dig Through Time, gives him a very high ceiling. If he finds Drown in Sorrow, that's great. And even if he fails to do so, it's not the end of the world. He can go do something else with his turn.
Finds, looks like Murderous Cut, some selection of lands. He'll go ahead and take the cut. That one's hard to pass up on, especially when his graveyard is still this full.
Yep. Yeah, Murderous Cut is great, and it gives him option to, now he's potentially looking at a turn with 3 awesome things happening, which is the Dig Through Time, the Murderous Cut, and the Freakish Cure. And that might give him sort of the time and breathing space he needs to get to Garrick.
Took Sultai Charm and Murderous Cut. But there is still this issue where Jessup's needs to stop taking damage off his own lands at some point here. I mean, the Jeskai deck does play like a red deck a lot of the time.
Yeah, the upshot is Jim's probably cut a lot of his burn, so he's at slightly less risk of getting burned out. But you're right, he's taking a lot of points right now. Freakish Cure helps, but it's still a lot of points.
He's going to take 2, rather take 1 to deal 2. Freakish Cure will take down the Rabble Master. Jessup, believe it. Gains 1 off that, goes to 14. And back on Jim's side, Stoke the Flames, a land, an Outpost Siege. And yeah, great time for Outpost Siege. But look at the foresight on Jessup's side. He did take Sultai Charm preemptively off that Dig Through Time.
Yeah, now
And
this is
strong move.
This is the huge tempo swing turn from Danny's side of the table. He's played a Dig Through Time, killed both of Jim's plays. Now Jim's entire turn is his Outpost Siege. Danny's going to be able to untap, kill it with Sultai Charm, leave up Negate or something else.
An empty board.
Yeah, just a great set of turns here for Danny.
And this is the power of these Delve cards. That Danny was really able to get this tempo play based on the fact that his Dig Through Time cost 2, his Murderous Cut cost 1. His spells were all very inexpensive.
He's still got 4 cards in his graveyard.
Yeah.
We're not even that late into the game.
2 Satyr Wayfinders, as you said, even when one of them misses, has a lot of potential. And with that draw, BioBlight as well, if he can leave up, if he has a blue-black duel, I don't believe that he can leave that up. I don't think he can leave up double black and negate at the same time. So I'll have to pick between the two. But still, strong spot for him.
Yep.
A lot of really big mana restrictions on the Sultai deck. If you think about a turn where you want to leave up Bioblade, you want to leave up Negate, and you want to cast Sultai Charm, that's a lot of colored mana symbols we're playing with.
Yeah, and unfortunately for Danny, a lot of the mana right now is coming through these pain lands, which you feel like if these were temples and he was casting these spells for free, he would be a very, very heavy favorite to win this game. But it's possible these pain lands just trip him up.
Satyr Wayfinder played first. Thoughtseize, Farika's Cure. There's a blue-black duel. There's a blue-black duel with a third color.
Yeah, that's great for Jessup there. I mean, if he feels like he needs Opulent Palace, so be it. Probably just takes the temple and now gets a pain-free source of blue and black mana, which is exactly what he's looking for.
It does seem like in games 2 and 3 he can get away with more pain lands as Jim sideboards away from a lot of his burn plan.
Mm-hmm.
But even so, you're right. I mean, this mana is a great thing for Danny to play. And, you know, he cast Wayfinder there, in a way, just to search for more mana.
Yep.
And that'll be the Sultai Charm. No extra cards for Davis. Pass back. Jim's still with some cards left in his hand, and Danny does not have the counter magic up just now. Soulfire Grandmaster the draw for Jim. But he's running into that part of the game where Danny's just going to start killing everything on sight.
Yeah, Jim is running low on action, that's for sure.
Here's a land. He's got an interesting situation. So if he plays one Soulfire Grandmaster, he has two Grandmasters and a Stoke. If he plays both Soulfire Grandmasters, and there isn't a kill spell on Danny's side, Jim can activate and convoke next turn. However, there's a lot of risk there.
I like this play a little bit better, where you're probably going to bleed out a removal spell, and next turn he still has access to, you know, if he draws a land, being able to run the same play.
Yeah.
I don't think he's in a big rush to establish the loop. I think it's one of those things where he's trying to trade resources, and if the game happens to get a spot where that becomes a line of play, great, but he's not banking on it.
You see, Bioblade was the draw for Jessup. Already had one in hand. So first Bioblade hits the Grandmaster, and Jim's down to 21 from Satyr Wayfinder. So hang on to one Grandmaster, his draw for the turn. That was Sarkhan. Or Sarkhan. Sarkhan's pretty good here.
Well,
were it not for the... I mean, it looks pretty good here. We know that Jessup has it covered.
It's one of the most powerful cards in Jim's deck, and he needs some powerful stuff right now, so it looks good on the surface, but...
Yeah, he needs to get through the negate somehow. This one will certainly do it. But you're right. I mean, Jessup is very close to getting the Garruk Apex Predator cast. At 12, it looks like Jessup is going to be able to bridge to the late game. There's still some mines he has to avoid, but...
Yeah, but his draw steps are also so good from this spot, too.
Absolutely. Soulfire Grandmaster is the play from Davis. And he's going for that top deck, I think, of rebuying Stoke instead of just jamming the Sarkhan.
Well, I think Jim's perspective is it's really unlikely that Sarkhan resolves. Danny's got a lot of mana available, and it's possible that his only answer to anything is something like Hero's Downfall, and he tries to bleed that out first.
So he does get the second Bioblight. Jim down to 20. And Jim didn't lose too much there. The draw from Jessup was a Crux of Fate. Another land from Davis. And now he pretty much, his only line is to jam this Sarkhan.
He can wait. I don't think he has to move just yet.
Waiting for maybe a negate of his own?
Or, yeah, something to play over the top.
It's a dangerous game to wait against Sultai. See if Jim does it. He goes for Sarkhan. That'll be negated.
Yep. I don't mind going in for there. I do think there's an argument, though, for Jim to he can just wait for a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, Sarkhan is more or less a 4-damage burn spell here, so Jim's not that far off. You know, with 2 4-damage burn spells, he has a Stoke, he has a Sarkhan. He's not that far from just lethal burning, so he can be greedy with how he wants to play them.
Yep.
Jim going to try to thin out his deck. Does have Jessup down to 12. Jessup's hand, Crux of Fate, Drown in Sorrow, and, well, the big payoff, Garruk. Jim's got to know that there's probably some large planeswalker or some big threat waiting in Jessup's hand.
Seems likely. I mean, it's not a guarantee, but it does seem very likely.
Yeah, not a bad draw here from Javis. It's another copy of Stoke the Flames. When you realize he has, another Sarkhan and more Stokes, that doesn't take much to deal 12.
Yep.
Draw for Jessup with Sultai Charm. He passes. We're back to Jim. And Jim not using the Stokes yet.
Well, I think that he doesn't want to play him into open mana, and he feels at some point Danny's going to tap out for something like Garrick or Ugin, and then that's an opportunity
fire
to
off
land him.
2. Well, if he needs to.
Jim's so low on resources that he can't really afford to have the Stoke just get countered by a negate. He's got to try to sneak it through.
Absolutely. Here's Rabble Master. Will Jessup take 1 here to activate his Drown in Sorrow? Or will he still Tie Charm the Rabble Master? No, he's going to take 1. And there's his 7th land. It comes into play tapped. It's Opulent Palace. He can leave up the Sultai Charm, cast Drown in Sorrow, and play his 7th land. Looks like that's what he'll do. Here is the Drown in Sorrow. We'll take care of the board. Jim, his hand is 2 Stoke the Flames. He has Jessup at 11, so a virtual 3 if he can get his hand to resolve. Danny scries to the bottom off Drown. And here's Opulent Palace. He'll pass back. Remaining cards are Crux of Fate, Garruk, Apex Predator, and Sultai Charm.
And Jim's just still waiting. Just assuming at some point that Danny's going to tap out for something big.
Temple of Triumph, the draw for Jim. Land's not the worst there. It does give him 8 mana, so now he can go for both Stokes on the same turn if he needs to.
Yeah,
also,
it's a pretty big deal. I think land number 8 there is not bad, especially since it's a scry land.
Yeah, was able to scry a land to the bottom off it too. And Jessup did have enough mana for Garruk there, but opts not to play it. So at that point, you're playing Garruk on 10 mana if you're not going to play it on 7.
Something like that, yeah.
Oh, here's land number 9. Does look like it.
It's a really interesting cat and mouse game.
Jim with another land. It's a scry. It's a temple. He sees, well, maybe a Rabble Master or a Sarkhan. If it's Sarkhan, he's got to be keeping it. Rabble Master's closer.
I think Rabble Master's still good enough to keep.
Hero's Downfall, the draw for Jessup. And Jessup with such patience here. Especially once you see Jim scry a card to the top, it really does encourage patient play.
Yeah. Because that could be the last burn spell he needs, or that could be some...
Yeah. Well, if it's the last burn spell, Jessup can't do anything about it.
Well, he still has access to the Sultai Charm, and he has an opportunity to find some help.
Sure. Here's Goblin Rabble Master. Will Jessup downfall it? Downfall's one of his only answers to, I guess, he has to decide which one he wants to hang on to between Sultai Charm and Downfall. It looks like he's hanging on to Sultai Charm. Failing there, one plays on Outpost Siege, one plays on Sarkhan.
Yep.
He wants the Outpost Siege answer more. I guess the draw 2 ability is not irrelevant.
Although right now he's also vulnerable to Mantis Rider.
Okay, you're right. Yep, Mantis Rider counts as well.
I don't know, you got to pick something. There's just too many different threats in Jim's deck.
And now Jessup goes for Garruk on his turn, not actually hitting the 10th land, but the equation changed.
He picked up Negate, and Negate gives him protection against a lot of bad stuff.
That negate. Okay, so if you're Jim, you have to think, okay, what just... To me, that's I read it one of 2 ways. Either Jessup just drew the Garruk, or he just drew some 2-mana spell.
Yep.
Somehow, something just changed about the equation, and you're not really sure what it is. Because Jessup didn't make this play last turn on 9 mana.
Right, yeah. I mean, it's possible that the Garrick was drawn, but as you mentioned, possible the same full stroke negate, something was drawn to change the equation.
Right. And that negate is so powerful for Jessup. It gains him 4 life. It takes away a lot of Jim's best draws. Another land for Davis. It's Flooded Strand. 2 Stokes in hand. Can't imagine Jessup's ever leaving that negate down. So
no chance.
Yeah.
No chance.
So Jim's going to need to find 7 more points of damage before Garruk takes a hold of the game. It's going to be pretty hard. Garruk does tie up the ground and actually does give Jessup an answer to Sarkhan.
And doesn't take that long for it to threaten lethal also.
No, you make 3 creatures. That -8 will kill anybody. Or simply, I guess, +1ing also kills them. Just as fast.
Yep.
Garruk, pretty good card in just the all-kill spell strategy. The fact that he has the ability to destroy creatures and planeswalkers just on his own.
What I like about it a lot, and that's the same thing that I like about Ugin in this deck, is its guaranteed value. The absolute worst case scenario is you walk away with killing something of theirs or getting a 3/3 Death Toucher.
It has so much upside, and yeah, it always gets its cards. Swing for the with the Beast token puts Jim down to 14. Garruk makes another one, now 6 power on the board. This is going to be a 2-turn clock, 6 then 9. That will be 15 damage over the next 2 turns from Garruk. And I think if you get to the point where Jim starts having to stoke the beasts, that's the end of the game.
Yes. Well, Jim's still trying to play this game to hold on to the 2 stokes for as long as possible to hope to find something that also deals 3 or 4 damage and then pair that with the stokes and then hope to be able to generate lethal.
Now, there is an interesting situation. Jim did have a turn where he could have just fired off all the stokes. It would make Mantis Rider a lethal draw right now. Now, that's playing around things that may or may not exist.
Yeah.
He's going to go for 1 stoke. We'll see where it's going. Imagine it's got to be at Jessup.
Yeah, the fight over Garrick's already been lost. Just a steady stream of 3/3s from the spot is very good. Remember, Jim's taking 6 next turn. Another token gets generated, that's 9. So Danny does not even really need the Garrick at this point.
All right, he pointed at Danny as it points it at Danny. That'll get negated. Thousand step. We go back to Jim. He's at 13. Draw was Mystic Monastery. He has that and Mountain in his hand. It looks like we may just be headed for that game 3.
Yeah, that draw set needed to be something big. I suppose there's still
he could
the
draw
possibility that he draws Treasure Cruise and Treasure Cruise into a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, had he hit something, he possibly could have hit something like Soulfire Grandmaster that turn that would have been very strong as well.
Yeah.
Had he hit Grandmaster, he would actually next turn be able to just a double stoke.
Now, Danny has the Sultai Charm in hand. He's also now picked up a Hero's Downfall, so.
That should cut off all of Jim's outs. Yeah, Dan's drawing, when your opponent's draw 2 discarding with Sultai Charm, that is not a strong sign. And swing puts Jim to 7. See, I mean, see where Jessup goes. It looks like all roads lead to victory here.
Yep.
I have to think, what can he lose to? He's at 11. Jim has 3 cards in hand. Now we know, or rather 2 cards. We know one of them is just a mountain. But if you're Jessup, you're thinking, okay, if there are 2 burn spells, the third one is maybe one of them's a pseudo burn spell, something like a creature or, you know, a Mantis Rider. How do you play around these things?
I'm curious to know what Danny's contemplating right now.
I think he's thinking killing his own guy to gain life.
Yep. The problem that I understand that, the logic behind that play, the problem is that you're so far behind in terms of winning the game that you give Jim a lot of draw steps.
Yeah. Jessup comes to the same conclusion, goes ahead and makes another beast.
Please come up to the stage once again.
As we know, that's definitely that's the play that I don't think Jim can beat.
Yep. Not given what's in his hand. I mean, it would have to be
Right.
Treasure Cruise into perfect cards, probably.
Well, let's see if he can get there. Draw is Mystic Monastery. Okay, that will not do it. And we are on to game 3. I think Jim a little frustrated. There was a lot of lands on the end at the end by him.
It certainly was. Just kind of flooded out. Still a pretty compelling game, though. And a lot of, back and forth there. Both players respecting the other players. Top decks and possible responses to things. So you saw a lot of unorthodox play because both players know what the other person's bringing to the table.
Yeah, it does seem to show some vulnerability in the Sultai game plan, at least in the late game. We did see that game went, in a lot of ways, according to the textbook for Jessup. He killed creatures, cast a Dig Through Time, killed some more creatures, eventually played a Planeswalker, and didn't get burned out. But, it always felt at any of these points that with the right sequence of draws, Jim would be able to break, I guess, the lock that Danny had on the board.
Well, there's a lot of cards in the deck. I mean, just look at this roster of cards here. Bile Blight, Disable Stroke, Hero's Downfall, Soul-Tide Charm, Thoughtseize, Crux of Fate, Murderous Cut.
Generic answer cards.
Really setting aside Murderous Cut and Thoughtseize, maybe you kind of, maybe you don't. There's a lot of cards in here that may or may not line up the right way against the threats that get brought to the table.
Exactly.
Bile Blight doesn't kill everything. Disable Stroke doesn't answer everything. Hero's Downfall is not very effective if the card in question is Outpost Siege.
Right.
The Soul-Tide Charm answers some things, but doesn't answer Mana Strider. So it is possible for Danny to kill the first wave of stuff, start drawing a couple cards, have a good hand of reactive cards, but Jim still gets something that just slips through the cracks randomly.
Yeah, well, so the draw cards in the Sultai deck aren't anything like Sphinx's Revelation. They aren't 5-for-1s. They're dig through times. They're 2-for-1s. So you can certainly see a game where, say, Danny is sitting on a Bile Blight and a Sultai Charm and gets beaten to death by a Sarkhan.
And it happens even with the blue-black control deck, and that's a deck that's playing more cards like Dissolve.
Dissolve, Perilous Vault, things that, that are almost catch-alls.
And that still happens over there. So Danny's even more vulnerable to that sort of thing happening.
Yeah, that is one of the... I actually kind of really like that in the format, that you have a competitive control deck, but at the same time, there's vulnerability in their catch-alls.
Well, that's... I think that, R&D has kind of figured out that that's the puzzle they're going for. It's not... You don't want to give them just generic, like a whole fistful of generic counter spells that counter everything. Exactly. You don't want the control decks to just be bad, but you want to make sure that they're playing with things like Bile Blight and Soul-Tide Charm and not Mana Leak and Counterspell.
Yeah, certainly when you see the control decks in Legacy or Miracles deck, their hand instead will be like a Force of Will, a Counterspell, and 2 Swords to Plowshares.
Right.
Think of, well, there's not really many Magic cards that get around this.
Exactly.
I guess if you have Thrun or something, there's
it's a very narrow list, and it's cards that were basically explicitly designed to beat that kind of setup.
They're hexproof, uncounterable things, and even then, that's not always good enough.
Whereas over here, we can have much more organic stuff, like I'm playing Burmaz because I happen to be playing Burmaz. Also, Bile Blight is not very good against Burmaz, and so sometimes my opponent has Bile Blight in their hand, and I have Burmaz, and that's sweet.
All right, we're underway. Game 3. Both players just shuffling up quick, knowing they need the time. No one going back to the sideboard. Jim's on the play. He's going to start out with a turn 2 Seeker of the Way.
And he's got one of those important cards, I think, while he's on the play in the matchup, which is Mantis Rider. It's a way for him to develop his board in a way that doesn't play into Drown in Sorrow, and he really needs that kind of threat.
Well, we'll see what the rest of his holdings are. Thoughtseize from Danny Jessup. We'll see the hand. We see third land and fourth land is Shivan Reap and Mountain. And as far as the threats go, we have a Mantis Rider, an Outpost Siege, and then one more. I think it's a red Hydra up here.
I think it's Storm Breath Dragon.
Agreed.
And I think that Danny is going to select Mantis Rider out of this hand. So he's already taken some lumps here. Thoughtseize is going to get attacked next turn, and Mantis Rider is a really potent way to keep up with this curve. Excuse me, it's Stoke the Flame.
Yeah.
Yeah, and no surprise to see Danny take Mantis Rider out of this hand.
Actually, there are no Storm Breaths in the 75 for Jim.
Just on Sarkhan.
Yeah, just on Sarkhan. Yeah, he's actually very, like, a lot of times you see these decks board into lots of 5-drops, be it Wingmate Rocks or Sarkhans, but there aren't too many of them. Jim's deck is lower to the ground than you'd expect. Swing in from Seeker of the Way puts Jessup down to 16, but with no Mantis Rider, Jim does not have a play that turn. Lands, Stoke, and Outpost Siege. You see, Jessup has the Outpost Siege covered, but I don't think it's with Soul-Tide Charm. I think it's with Negate. So because that he can't turn 3 this Courser, he needs to just hold up Negate for it. That really does put a thorn in his game plan.
Yeah, also there's just Stoke in Jim's hand, so tapping out for Courser this turn doesn't do very much.
Yeah. If Jessup had the Soul-Tide Charm, he may still make, it's still trading, right?
Sure.
But the danger is he can't let this Outpost Siege hit the table. Not until he has a way to remove it. Jim's going to go for Outpost Siege. Force Jessup to have the Negate. Even if he does, Jim gets the prowess.
Yeah. Soul-Tide Charm works here too, but then the Soul-Tide Charm's not going after your Seeker of the Way.
Yeah. Actually, you're right. Jessup does have the Soul-Tide Charm. So,
he's got it covered in a couple different directions here.
He has to decide which one he wants. Normally you'd Negate, but with no more... He doesn't have many more lands in hand right now, so he may have to go for the Soul-Tide Charm just on the case of mana efficiency. It's going to be negate. Seeker gets in for 3. Jessup down to 13. And Polluted Delta, excellent draw for Jessup, especially when you look at his removal spells. One of them is Murderous Cut.
Yep, that's pretty much perfect. I mean, he does have the option here of drowning to get the Seeker off the table, and now he can play Polluted Delta.
And he has Murderous Cut if he needs it.
Some Rabble Master or Mantis Rider comes off for Jim here, and Jessup has it covered.
Fetch land, just such a great draw. Now, interesting decision here. I just want to talk about a little sequencing. If Jessup wanted to have the line open, he may want to fetch first so that had that scry found a good card, he wouldn't be presented with a dilemma.
I agree. I think that, yeah, he's slightly better served at just cracking the Delta straight away.
But as it was, the card was no good. It went to the bottom. So the worst he'll do is shuffle a bad card back in, which, okay. Soulfire Grandmaster, the turn for Jim. He leaves up 3 mana, 2 cards remaining in hand. Jessup's draw after this turn did hit another land. He has that Courser and now starting to get some extra mana up. Maybe he'll find a window in which to cast it. We know that Jim's got a Stoke and does have the mana to cast it thanks to the Soulfire Grandmaster.
Yep. And Danny aware of this as well from the earlier thoughts. So I think the first order of business, if he's going to cast a Courser this turn, is to get Soulfire Grandmaster off the table. That way Jim cannot take care of the Courser on Danny's turn.
And he'll actually look, he'll spend the mana to Murderous Cut the Soulfire Grandmaster. Did have to crack a fetch to do this. He's very carefully not making his land drop for the turn for this reason exactly. Now he flips Opulent Palace, gets the free card, very nicely sequenced, and with Dig Through Time on top of the library, you gotta like how Danny played that.
Yeah, so now Jim is in a position where if he wants to Stoke, it's his entire turn to do so. And
he has
then
2 lands in Stoke, yeah.
Danny gets to fire back with Dig Through Time or whatever else he wants to do.
Well, Danny has land 6 and only 1 card in graveyard, so either he gets to keep a Courser, or if the Courser dies, he can cast Dig.
Exactly.
This is great.
Yep.
I really like that turn. A lot of times, I feel like there's a temptation when playing Sultai to not use Murderous Cut on a Soulfire Grandmaster like that. It's a really great removal spell on a pretty easy to answer target.
Yeah, but Courser or Crewfix covers a lot of the potential responses that Jim can have. If it's Goblin Rabble Master, you don't really care that much. It's only Mantis Rider, and you still have a Crux of Fate left over in your hand as insurance.
Stoke takes care of the Courser. Yeah, and I think that's the part where I really like that he plays it that way. So now with 2 cards in the graveyard, Danny Jessup gets to play land 6. Jim a hand of all lands, and he knows that Dig Through Time is lying in wait. Danny wants to take no risks, doesn't want this guy countered. He'll fire it off main phase.
Yeah. The rest of his hand is not great right now. Crux of Fate and Sultai Charm, so Danny could really use some improvements in his hand.
Yeah, he'd love to have another answer and maybe a win con. So something like a downfall into Planeswalker would be great. Perhaps a Murderous Cut into Planeswalker. And I actually think he has access to all the cards just mentioned.
Yeah, he got a Garruk and a downfall out of it, so he's got protection in case Jim draws very well, and if Jim draws poorly, then he can just fire up Garruk.
Right, yeah, Sultai Charm and Hero's Downfall. Between those, and Crux of Fate. Between those, he should have everything covered. And he has his win con, Garruk. The question, which I'm interested to see, is how soon does Danny play the Garruk? Is it just turn 7, or does he really go deep?
Yeah, I mean, he can't do it just yet.
But with a draw for the turn, like Dig Through Time, which he just drew, Danny can take all the time he wants here.
Yeah, there's no rush.
He's at 13. The concern is, I guess, if you take forever, Jim starts throwing burn spells upstairs. And Danny, while he has all of Jim's permanents covered, I don't think he has burn spells covered right now.
Well, 13 is tough.
It's a big number.
That's a lot. I mean, that's with 1 Stoke down, a lot of the other smaller burn spells probably out of the deck.
Yeah, and he's not taking damage from his lands anymore. So Jim does draw a card. It's going to be Goblin Rabble Master. Jessup will go for Sultai Charm on it. Draws another Dig Through Time, maybe a little too much of a good thing.
Well, now he can actually cast the first one at least. So
yeah.
That's something.
Another land for Davis. And here's another end-step Dig Through Time. Right now, Jessup is covered against, I think, everything that is not Outpost Siege, so he's looking for Negate or Sultai Charm, and probably just lands other than that. Maybe even Tassiger would be fine.
I also just don't think it matters too much. Danny at this point is drawing so many cards that even if Jim finds one of his sources of card advantage, Danny can probably just power right through it.
Yeah, and I really like his keep there. Rather than taking a land, he goes and takes another copy of Courser of Crewfix, which is just excellent. Takes that and Farika's Cure.
Yeah.
Picked up a Drown in Sorrow for the turn. 6 card hand for Jessup. Jim's hand is just Stoke and lands. He's gonna Stoke the Courser. So Jessup will draw Satyr Wayfinder next turn. But I mean, Satyr Wayfinder, a great draw for Jessup too. Fills up the graveyard. And here's Outpost Siege. This is Jim's opportunity because Jessup Sultai charmed that Rebel Master instead of downfalling it. He does not actually have an answer to this Outpost Siege right now.
Yep, this is it's something, you know?
It's the card that Jim needed. Now,
Right.
whether or not the card will be enough remains to be seen. Satyr Wayfinder doesn't find the land Jessup wants. It mills 4. And now Jim goes to work. Gets a free Flooded Strand off the Outpost Siege. Draws a land for the turn, so no help just yet. And got value, but a missed turn there. That's going to be another dig through time for Jessup.
So even when the Wayfinder misses, it still hits.
Yeah, it still made mana. It was just one-shot mana instead of a land. Which really, when you have the dig through time, it isn't that much of a difference. He can find the Sultai Charm. I just don't see, even with good draws, Jim dealing with it.
And I don't even know if Danny took the Sultai Charm. He might just be ignoring that Outpost Siege.
Challenge Jim to play cards fast enough. Danny has great cards every turn here.
Yep.
Satyr Wayfinder swings for 1. That puts Jim down to 20. Over on Jessup's side, he's going to go with Courser of Crewfix again. He's just going to grind out some value. Here's Opulent Palace on top of the deck. That'll get played. Jessup up to 14. I suppose if he gains enough life with these Coursers, he doesn't really have to care about Outpost Siege.
No, not at all.
Outpost Siege shows Temple. Mantis Rider the draw for Jim. Good value. Top card is Negate, though. Temple shows another Mantis Rider on top of the deck. Jim will keep it there, and here's a Mantis Rider. It's going to try to go to work, and here's Downfall takes care of it.
And you can see this is the spot that control decks can get into sometimes where Outpost Siege gets into play, but they have enough sources of card advantage of their own, and there's enough weak cards in the Outpost Siege deck that they can just weather the storm. They can play right through it.
Yep, swings for 3. Davis down to 17. Jessup with the land drop goes up to 15 thanks to Courser. Passes back, has Negate in hand. Mantis Rider, the free card off Outpost Siege. Land drawn for Jim. He'll play the free Mantis Rider. It'll come into play. See if Jessup has a kill spell for it. It does not. Jessup down to 12. He's going to draw Bioblight, though. That's a kill spell for it. Free Yavimaya Coast off the top of the deck. Jessup back up to 13. And that is land number 9. Not very long before Jessup can actually just use Garrick and still have his removal up. He'll Bioblight the Mantis Rider, swing for 3. Javis down to 14, and the life totals are getting closer and closer.
Yeah, pretty crazy here that Danny does not even have to make a move with his copy of Garrick. There's no rush to get into play.
Yeah, free card for turn, Battlefield Forge for Jim. He'll try for Rabble Master. That'll get Freeka's cured. Jessup up to 15. And despite 2 cards a turn for Davis, Jessup continues to have the answers. His hand slowly running out of cards, but Davis slowly running out of life points.
It's not a lot left here for Jim.
And draw for Jessup is a land, but there's a land on top of the deck. He'll play that one, go to 16. Still hitting for 3 a turn. Amazing to think that with all these kill spells, it is just Courser and Wayfinder that are going to slowly peck away at Jim. But here they will do it, down to 11.
Not the first time we've seen Jessup do some real work with Wayfinder in this tournament, too. It's not like you can leave in your cheap removal against this sort of deck. So
we saw Satyr Wayfinder's race Rakshasa Death Dealers earlier today. Yeah. And now finally Jessup will make the Haymaker, though. It's Garruk Apex Predator. He makes a beast token. Sarkhan finds some big action. Outpost Siege found Sarkhan, but it may not be enough. Already 6 power on the side of Jessup, and he's ahead in the race. He can ignore Sarkhan if need be. But Davis will play it anyway. He'll try for it. Comes into play with 4. None of that for Jessup. Negate. Davis knew about it anyway, though. Another land. He'll pass back. Jessup going to go ahead and fetch. Stays even on life thanks to Course of Kruvix. 16 and 11. 6 power on Jessup's side of the board. He's representing a 2-turn clock. Top card is Temple of Mystery. Draws it for the turn. Next card, Satyr Wayfinder. But he will swing for 6. Davis down to 5. Another beast added to the board. That is power 6, 7, 8, and 9. Davis will need 2 kill spells to survive through the turn. Right, we'll need a lot of that off of his Outpost Siege. Can it deliver? Top card is Valorous Stance. That'll do part of it. Rabble Master can block. If there are some worlds where it can block.
Yeah, this is he can kill the Courser with the Valorous Stance.
Here's Rabble Master, another land for Jim. Makes a Goblin. Goblin swings in, bounces off for the 3/3 beast token. Valor Stance takes care of Courser. 2 3/3s and a 1/1 in play. Jim at 5.
But now Danny just can go ahead and minus Garrick if he's feeling so inclined.
He's going to go ahead and scry. He doesn't have to show the top card anymore. Can minus Garrick, can also swing. We'll see who does. He's at a very healthy 17. He will minus Garrick. That's 3. That kills the Rabble Master. Jessup up to 19. Is this a lethal swing? It's for 7. It's lethal unless Jim has a play. Garrick down to 4. Here's the attack, and we have it. Danny Jessup, 2 games to 1 with 20 seconds on the clock, defeats Jim Davis, handing him his first loss.
That's a big deal. I mean, again, if Joe Lissette and Danny Jessup, they want any chance of catching Jim Davis, they're really going to
need to keep him out of day 2.
They got to keep him out of day 2, and Danny's done his work so far. I think a matchup that on the balance, pretty solid for him. Jim with some good sideboard options, but games 2 and 3 just kind of flooded out a little bit there, and Danny had some very good draws.
Yeah, impressive.